everyone. I hope you all had a pleasant and happy new year. I apologize that I have not been able to upload videos until now. It has been a very busy week for me leading up to the ending of 2015 and going into the new year. So, unfortunately, I've had to delay videos and figure out exactly what I want to do with certain videos. So, I should be caught up though by the end of today. So without further ado, I did mention a while back that I was going to be addressing some films that came out at least this past year of 2015, only because it was a really big year for movies. There was just a lot of different movies that were coming out that were relatively well recognized and sort of becoming, I guess, popular again at least. And this is a perfect example of this. And as you can probably see by the title and thumbnail, we're going to be addressing The Force Awakens. Now, after reviewing and looking into all of the praise and criticism of this film, if you really want the short version of what I thought of, have you not seen the film yet, I would say it's good. I don't think it is as good as the original films, being the fourth, fifth, and sixth film. I still think that those still have a little bit more originality, are a little bit more intriguing and engaging and more interesting, I would say, than this particular film. But regardless, it's still, I think, an overall good product in that it is trying to recapture a lot of what was really part of Star Wars, and I kind of understand some of the decision making that was made for, again, marketing purposes, so that this film would sell. And I kind of understand the money making element behind it, because I find it funny that we don't treat films like they're not a money making business, like that everybody just makes films just because they love filmmaking. And I think that should really be at the heart. I think that should really be at the start, and I almost feel like it should be the start of any industry because, if you love doing something, you should put that love over the money part of it. But I understand that sometimes, unfortunately, since we live in a money-driven society, that it only makes sense that we would do certain things for marketing purposes, and we would do things based upon the times and who we are and demographics and who we're trying to appeal to. So that I think is what kind of drags the film down for me personally. But again, if you want the shortest possible explanation as to of this movie, I would say it is good if you go in with the expectation of that this is not going to be like the originals. This is not going to be like, it's going to try to recapture the originals, but it's not going to be as close to the quality or the intricacy of the originals. But it's trying to be a recapturing of that. And in doing so, it is trying to set up a trilogy again. It is trying to go through the same act structure of the first three films that came out. And obviously, this is way more well constructed than the prequels. I will say that right out of the gate. So if you go in with that, knowing that it's going to be at least preferable to the prequels, then I think you will find some enjoyment out of it. But I think if you have very high expectations for this movie, because there is a lot of hype around it, I think there may be a certain level of disappointment among people. But I'm sure there's a lot of people who would say differently and feel that this is just as good as 4, 5, and 6. But that's not my personal opinion. But my general idea behind this is if you're open-minded and you don't mind it being a little bit more geared towards being on the side of fan service and kind of just be sort of a more marketed product, then I don't think you would mind it all too much. But if you go in with that kind of mentality to begin with, it's probably going to be hard for you to kind of embrace the enjoying elements of this film, which I think there are a certain amount. But my short version is it's good. I don't think it's great. I don't think it's it's the greatest thing ever, but I don't think it's as horrible as some people are making it out to be. So I would just say, just go in with that mentality. As far as I'm concerned for now, I'm going to be going into really in depthly certain parts of this movie. Because again, it is the most hyped movie of the year. I mean, I'm sure that there's probably those who will say, no, 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 there was this movie, and I'll say, I know, that one was pretty hyped up too. But when you really look at how much marketing was put in. I mean, next to the Minions, this was probably the most marketed material I've seen throughout this entire year. So let me dive into uh, this is where I'm going to dive into my personal thoughts onto each parts of the film. So I'll be discussing the characters, story, and the whole visual slash direction, and get you my real personal in-depth thoughts. But if you do not want certain parts of the movie to be spoiled for you, then I would suggest go and watch the movie and then come back, and then you can hear me ramble from now on. But basically, um, the good parts to this film, and let's start with the characters. I think the characters are okay slash good, but not as I think fun or engaging as the original characters. Even though we do have really a main character that was in the original series, which I will get into. But starting off with the main character, and the main character of this film is technically a female. Her name being Ray. Now there's been some conflict as to whether or not she is a Mary Sue, or what I like to call does this character have a certain amount of Jennifer Lawrenceism in her? In other words, is she too perfect? And I can see both sides of the argument here. But I think I would like to not really suspend too much judgment, only because there is a certain amount of backstory that is given, but is still not clear onto whether or not she had some kind of exposure to the Force and the Jedi uh, training or whatnot when she was a child. So on the one hand, I understand that I think her capabilities should have been downplayed. I'm not saying that they shouldn't have tried to at least give her some kind of more human-esque element to her and not make her super, you know, basically don't turn her into Superman. I understand that. I'm totally I get it. I understand. But on the one hand, I still think that there's certain amounts of the story that are clearly not fully fleshed out or explained, and they're really trying to hype that up for the next movie. So I almost want to say that, I can't really suspend judgment too much on her. I don't think that she's horrible. Um, she kind of does start off a little bit rude initially, but I think that's only because she's in an isolating area, and she doesn't really have contact with people. So when she initially meets the characters, she kind of is not as friendly at first, but then she kind of opens up and ends up being a little bit more open and more friendlier, I guess you could say. um, so I think there is these kinds of interesting gray spots where I almost feel like, on the one hand, I understand the arguments that have been made that she is way too perfect, but then I understand the other arguments too of, well, we still don't know a certain part of her character, we still don't know her real capabilities, and also I think there was still a certain amount of understanding as to why she would be good at certain things. But obviously I think that there should have been a certain amount of downplaying. And I think if you downplayed it, I think people would have been a lot more satisfied. And I think I definitely would have been a lot more satisfied had they done that. But I don't think I don't think she's as bad as some of these other characters that have come out that are more of the, gung ho girl power kind of characters. Um, so again, I think she's just kind of in the middle there for me. She just kind of, she has the good points to her, and then there's just other points where I understand where the perfection is a little bit too much. And we shouldn't make her be like Jesus, and yeah, and we shouldn't Jennifer Lawrence her, in other words. We shouldn't Hunger Games, her up. I understand that. But I think I'd like to see, though, too, the training process, because that's really where we're supposed to see her ultimately, become the Jedi person, or turn into a Jedi. So, again, I almost want to suspend that judgment. Overall, good, not fantastic. And I find it hilarious, too, because people don't want to complain about the originals, because it's like, well, it's, yeah, sure, she was kind of more of a, you know, action girl, but so was Leia. And even Leia, she had a gun thingy, and we never see her being trained to shoot. And there's never a point where we really know, how does a princess know how to be in that kind of tough, environment? Where at least with Rey, it kind of makes sense, because she's in this very kind of just, completely poor, downtrodden, um, really isolated area, because she is supposed to be kind of like this smuggler person, or parts gatherer person. So, again, I could understand the complaining, but on the one hand, this isn't something that was completely new and revolutionary to Star Wars. We've seen a girl power character before, and all I can say is that at least she didn't argue with the guy that she's gonna end up. Well, I mean, she argues a bit, but not to the extent that Leia argued with Han Solo in the other movies. So that I liked kind of how that annoyance was downplayed, because it gets annoying, because just seeing two characters bicker all day is just gets annoying. It's just not fun to watch. So that being said, I think she's okay. She's not the greatest, but still okay. She's got some issues. Maybe they'll work things out within the other films. I don't want to really suspend too much judgment. Second character, which is who's technically the new character, that is the second main new character. In other words, the character that we haven't seen in the other films. In this case, being Finn. Now, Finn is supposed to be a stormtrooper turned into a good guy. So, and you'll see this within the beginning of the film. And although I think the transitioning is a little bit kind of rushed, I almost feel like, they could have probably built up this whole transitioning a little bit more, considering the fact that, they tell you about he talks about it on his backstory, how he was captured when he was a kid, and he was forced to become kind of a stormtrooper and go out and conquer all of these different planets or whatnot. I just don't think that somebody with that amount of psyche put into them would suddenly flip on a dime like that. I think there would be there would have to be at least a significant amount of deprogramming. So I think had they, maybe had him change later on, I think that would have added maybe a little bit more of a more dimension, at least, and would have made it a little bit more realistic and more human, I think, than just having him suddenly say, wow, this is really messed up what I'm doing. I shouldn't be with these people, and also there is no amount, like, he is actually the most likable of the characters, I think. Of the new ones, he is actually the one who has the most charisma, has the most, he just offers a certain amount of likability to him that is actually very charming and very engaging to watch, I think. The problem is, though, is that when he changes, he kind of ends up taking the more coward route, in that his character becomes very scared and he doesn't really want to get involved with anything. Which is something that I could understand, being in fear of, being caught or abused, or, something of that nature. I can understand that psyche built into him. But I think there also should have been a certain amount of anger. The dark side is supposed to be it's supposed to be a place of psyche where, you let your anger take hold of you. You let the hatred flow through you. You don't control your emotions. So, and you can clearly see this with the main villain, which I'll get to, but you don't really see it with Finn. And I almost felt like, if you're on the side of the dark side, you would have that kind of anger still kind of built into you and festered within you as a character. Because even the characters that aren't given that much screen time and are on the dark side, they're pretty angry. Like when that one guy gives a speech and it's all like very, you could just shout out the Nazi symbolism that was going on there. But I mean, he was really just angry, and I think that anger needed to be still infested within Finn's character. And it really wasn't there, and I thought that was a really missed opportunity there, unfortunately. But overall, good. Not great, I'd say, but still good. It has potential, I think. Maybe we'll see some of that later on within his character. Maybe he'll suddenly start to get a little bit more edgy and a little bit more on the tougher and angry side, but we'll see. It wasn't really presented here, so. But I think that's really ultimately all I can say about him. Good, but I don't think as great. Third main character, and this is really the main a main character because he actually takes up a majority of the screen time, and he's actually not a new character. He was in the previous films, and that's Han Solo. Han Solo is a main character in this movie. Like, he takes up a good chunk of screen time, and you sort of see his kind of struggle because he's a lot older. He's he's not the rogue he used to be. Let's just say that. And he's kind of, but he's just kind of there to, again, obviously pay fan service, but at the same time, he still feels like the genuine character. It would be like taking the character of Han Solo and making him years and years and years older. And I think overall, the way his character was presented was really well executed. It's just what they do with his character that kind of rubbed me a little bit the wrong way later on within this film. That almost made me say that this was a marketing decision, because knowing how much Hans, in particular Harrison Ford, would want to be on a Star Wars movie, I could kind of understand. Yeah, that okay. Well, we'll kind of have to do something now with your characters, so you're not in the movie because you're costing just too much money. So again, I could think that this was primarily a marketing decision, unfortunately, and sometimes that ends up impacting a film. I mean, it's sad, but I mean, sometimes you have to change the storyline for the sake of, budgetary reasons, and obviously that's going to maybe diminish a little bit of the product that you had going for it. But okay, this is big spoilers coming up, so if you don't want to hear, just turn off. Okay, because this really is an impactful part, and really is part of the whole story and of Han Solo. He passes away, okay, because his son is actually the villain. So Kylo Ren is the villain of this movie, and yes, it's Leia's kid, so obviously they had him, and sent him off to be trained with Luke, but apparently he got messed up and became a villain, so to speak. So he's kind of like I guess a Sith in training almost, or I don't know if you call it a Sith in training or call it I guess he's just a Darth Vader in training. So he's like a mini version of of Darth Vader, and he ends up killing Han Solo, okay? And this is the part where I thought, okay, this was partially a marketing ploy, because obviously, you know, part of me is saying, yeah, obviously, you know, this guy is probably going to cost them a lot of money to be in 3 films, obviously. And on the one hand, although it was very, I think, emotionally well done, it still left me with a little bit of I was a little bit unsatisfied with that choice of what they did with his character, because I almost feel like he should have gone on a little bit more. You know, he shouldn't have been just X'd off in the first film. Like, that's totally not fair to Han Solo, and I almost felt that had they killed Leia off, it would have been a whole lot better, and it actually would have made much more sense, since she was the one who really felt that her son had some potential to be a good person or a good human being or become part of the light, so to speak, of the Force. You know, I thought that, you know, had she tried, I think, and failed, you know, it would have made a lot more sense. It only seemed like Han Solo was going out and even trying to convince his son was because of his wife Leia. It was like, please bring our son home, please, please. It's not like I could just go out and try to do it myself, you know. So yeah, I almost felt like that was a bad decision overall. I mean, he's still overall as a character, Han Solo is great. I just don't think, I think Xing him off in the beginning was just, okay, that's just way too soon. That's just way too soon. And had they replaced it with, you know, Leia, I think it would have been much better and would have given Han Solo more of a reason to still fight the fight. Whereas I think, you know, throughout the entire rest of the film, you feel like Leia's just completely defeated. I mean, even though she is supposed to be some kind of general, but we don't really see her do anything generally related. So again, I almost felt like that her being taken off would have been a better decision. But I wasn't in charge of making this film, and I definitely wasn't looking into the budget. So had I probably looked into the budget, I would have to go, oh yeah, we have to shoot. Yeah. So again, I think it was primarily more of a marketing decision than really a genuine story decision. So, and budgeting decision, obviously. So, yeah, can kind of see why they did that. And the new, what was he? The new flight, the pilot guy, pilot leader. I guess he's supposed to be kind of the Han Solo character, the charismatic guy, but he doesn't get a whole lot of screen time. Like he's in it for a little bit in the beginning, and then we don't see him till the way end. So I mean, I like to see more of him. Maybe there's more character stuff going on in the next movies. And heck, this is how, you know, you sell stuff. You know, you don't reveal too much, especially when you're selling films. You know, you don't reveal too much. You don't tell people things, otherwise they're gonna know everything. So, and are not gonna be wanting or intrigued to see the next installment. So again, I want to suspend judgment on him only because he didn't get a lot of screen time. So those are basically the characters for the most part. And yes, Chewie is Chewie. The BB-8 robot is a cute little replacement for R2-D2, and even though R2-D2 does appear in this movie eventually, as well as C3PO, C3PO, I think that's the acronym. Yeah, overall, those side characters and Leia are kind of the same, but again, they're kind of more phoned in a little. I mean, but the BB-8 one was cute. I really liked the little BB-8 robot. Just adorable. So yeah, that's just my honest thoughts on the characters in a nutshell. But moving on to the biggest, this is really the biggest issue that I had with this movie. And this is where it went from kind of great to good for me. It really was the plot, okay? Because this plot is a lot. And I mean a lot. Like the first movie of the whole Star Wars universe being created. So the fourth episode. Because we got another Death Star. That's what we got. Okay, it's a lot bigger Death Star, but it's a Death Star nonetheless. It's the same exact thing. Oh, and I should mention too the villain, Kylo Ren. He's good. He's obviously nowhere near the interesting levels of Darth Vader. Definitely not as iconic. But at the same time, he was still at least a little bit interesting. I think it would have been nicer had he actually had some injury to him. You know, and that's the reason why he's wearing that mask, you know, and then when you see him revealed and he's got no injury whatsoever, you're just like, what's the point of you wearing that mask? Is it just so that nobody can see you? I mean, I understand if, you know, you maybe wore something else that didn't make you look like you had to breathe underneath it, you know. I don't know. It just kind of threw me off, only because, you know, Vader had this very kind of elaborate backstory, and this kid doesn't seem to have that much of an interesting backstory. But regardless, he was all right. Just there's just certain that well revealed, so I don't really want to spoil all too much with him anyway either. So he's good, just not as I think interesting or as unique as Darth Vader. But lastly, obviously, the plot, like I mentioned before, is the biggest weakness, I think, with this film, because it is a lot like the fourth film. It is a lot like A New Hope. Because it has the Death Star, it has a lot of plot elements that are really, 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 really similar. Like, if you've seen the first trilogy, you will see the similarities clearly highlighted and really emphasized. I mean, I felt like had they just completely gone just for the map route and just, you know, they're just trying to figure out where Luke is, you know, like how they actually set it up, the movie, like that's how the movie was going to be about, then I would have been totally fine with it. But no, they have to play with this Death Star thing that's taking control of the entire galaxy and destroying planets and whatnot. And, you know, it's what we've seen before, except it's a planet apparently and not like this mechanical thing. So yeah, that's really the other thing that I think, you know, put a dent in me enjoying this movie. But overall, it's good. It's well presented. It's well executed. The direction is actually really well done. Excuse me, the direction parts of, you know, how everything is shown is nice. The pacing is just very fast. Very J.J. Abramsy. So if you do not like J.J. Abrams, direction, you're probably gonna have issues with this movie. But that's overall that was good because they had actual puppets as opposed to a lot of it being CGI. There were some that was CGI, but not all. Some was a little bit kooky, but it wasn't that kooky as some other films that I've seen before. So overall, it's well presented visually. I think it's just the direction and, you know, some of the pacing I think was just a little bit too fast. I think they could have slowed it down a little bit. But that's just my honest thoughts. I'd be more than happy to hear what anybody else has to say. I'm sure there's a lot of opinions that are out there about this particular film. And although it had a little bit of disappointment to it, I still felt like it was trying to capture certain parts that were really true and in essence to what Star Wars was about. But we'll kind of see where they go with it. I would almost say check out the movies that are going to be on the side and that are not going to be part of the main plot, because that's probably where you're going to get the most originality for your buck, because they're not going to focus on the main story. You know, they can just go around and play with the Star Wars lore. So if you would prefer that, then it's probably the best. But I think that's really ultimately all I can say, though. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a pleasant day, week, month, and year. And I hope to see you on the next video. Take care and Happy New Year, everybody.